State of Florida versus Sakina. We, the jury, find as follows as the defendant in this case. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree.
Guilty.
That the jury was able to see the story for what it is, that Kayla did not deserve to die the way that she did.
She thought, oh God, she's coming for me and my baby. That's when she grabs the glass and then she blacks out.
The moment I heard guilty, it was what we all needed for closure in this moment to move forward, to start our healing process. It's been a long 3.5 years.
You could say jealous and like insecure. Starts grabbing my hair and punching me, and I'm on the floor. I'm kicking. I'm trying to get up to fight back at this point because now it's a fight.
Punching you where?
My face.
Where on your face? Point to it for us.
I don't remember, but everywhere on
my
my face.
You don't remember where she was punching you in your face?
In my face.
I mean, this is why you killed her, right?
No.
Right?
No.
It's not?
No.
You didn't kill her because she was fighting you?
No, I killed her because she took the glass from the hookah and slashed me across my stomach. We walking over the blood, I was walking in the blood.
You walked in the blood?
Yes.
With what shoes?
The BB shoes. I changed my shoes. No, she's getting close enough because my jacket was cut up.
Okay, your jacket was cut up?
My jacket was cut up.
Okay, and what'd you do with that jacket?
Threw it away.
"5:17 a.m. Tamarack, Florida. A 23-year-old opens her door. She has 90 seconds to live. Kayla Hodgson didn't know the woman in the mask, but the woman knew everything about her. Her address, her schedule, her boyfriend, and the exact moment she blocked her on Instagram. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated social media revenge. Sakina Thompson, 28 years old, Queens, New York, booked a flight, bought a disguise and hunted down a stranger. All because a man she'd already broken up with started dating someone new. But here's what the headlines won't tell you. Was Sakina Thompson a cold-blooded killer? Or did Instagram turn rejection into obsession, and obsession into murder? Because if blocking someone can get you killed in 2022, are any of us safe?
You wrote her on IG and she, in fact, ignored your message initially, correct?
Correct.
And that made you angry?
Correct.
Kayla's family is still fighting for justice. In this case, it's happening in your backyard, Tamarack, Broward County, South Florida. So drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? And have you ever heard of the Instagram murder case? Because if you haven't, you're about to understand why everyone's talking about it. Let's go back to early July 2022. Queens, New York. Springfield Gardens to be exact. A neighborhood where everyone knows everyone's business, where Instagram stories get screenshotted faster than they disappear, where a relationship status change doesn't just happen online. It echoes through group chats, beauty salons and backyard barbecues. Sakina Thompson is scrolling through her phone. She's done this maybe 40 times today. Maybe more. She won't admit it, but her thumb knows the rhythm by heart. Instagram back to messages, back to Instagram, refresh, refresh, refresh. She's looking for something. Or maybe someone. Revolto Robinson. Her ex. The man she'd built a life with, argued with, forgiven, fought with again. The man who just weeks ago was still texting her goodnight. But now his Instagram is full of someone else. Kayla Hodgson. 23 years old. Living in Tamarack, Florida, about 1,400 miles south. Bright smile. Fashion forward. The kind of girl who posts mirror selfies with captions about self-love and growth. The kind of girl who watches The Office on repeat and quotes Michael Scott at dinner parties. The kind of girl who, according to her family's testimony in Broward County Court on December 1, 2025, could walk into any room and make it feel warmer. Sakina doesn't know any of that yet. All she knows is what she sees on a screen. Kayla's hand in Revolto's hand. Kayla laughing at something Revolto said. Kayla wearing a necklace that looks expensive, the kind of expensive that makes you wonder who bought it. And here's the thing about social media that nobody talks about. It doesn't just show you what's happening. It shows you what you're missing. Every photo is a question you didn't ask for. Every story is a reminder that life moved on without asking your permission. So when Kayla's profile suddenly goes blank for Sakina sometime around July 10th or 12th, 2022, it's not just a technical glitch. It's a message. User not found. You've been blocked. You don't get to watch anymore. Now most people would take that as a hint. Maybe feel embarrassed. Maybe vent to a friend over wine and delete the app for a week. But Sakina Thompson isn't most people. Because in her mind this block isn't about boundaries. It's about disrespect. It's about a 23-year-old girl in Florida who doesn't even know her, who's never met her, deciding that Sakina doesn't deserve to see her own ex-boyfriend's life. And that's when something shifts. July 11, 2022. Less than 24 hours after the block. Sakina is at her computer. She's not just angry now, she's methodical. She opens a browser. Types in a flight search. New York to Fort Lauderdale. One way. Departure, as soon as possible. She's 2 months pregnant at this point. That detail will come out later in court documents and it will make people ask questions. Questions like, what kind of person flies across the country for revenge while carrying a child? Questions like, was she trying to win Revelto back, or was this about something darker? But in that moment, sitting in her apartment in Springfield Gardens, Sakina isn't thinking about any of that. He's thinking about Kayla Hodgson. He's thinking about addresses. He's thinking about timing. Because here's what most people don't realize. Finding someone in 2022 isn't hard. Not if you're motivated. Not if you've been watching their Instagram long enough to know their favorite coffee shop, their gym, their apartment complex. Tamarack Village Apartments on Northwest 93rd Avenue and 57th Street. It's all right there. Public. Posted. Geotagged. Sakina clicks confirm on the flight. July 3rd. Early morning arrival. She'll need a rental car. She'll need a hotel in South Florida. Somewhere close but not too close. Somewhere she can think. Somewhere she can plan. And then she starts shopping. But not for baby clothes. Not for prenatal vitamins. She's looking at disguises. Hats. Masks. Gloves. The kind of items that, individually, mean nothing. A woman buying a baseball cap at a Target in Queens. A woman ordering disposable gloves on Amazon. Normal purchases. Innocent purchases. Until they're not. Now here's where the story splits into two versions. The version Sakina will tell herself, and the version that will be reconstructed later in a Broward County courtroom. In Sakina's version, maybe she just wanted to talk. Maybe she just wanted to see this woman who'd taken her place, to understand what Revelto saw in her. Maybe she thought if she could just explain face to face that she and Revelto had history, a real history, not some Instagram fling, then Kayla would back off. But the evidence will tell a different story. The kind of story that starts with a blocked account and ends with blood on a doorstep. Because on July 13, 2022 at 5:17 in the morning, when the Florida sun is just starting to turn the sky purple, when most of Tamarack is still asleep, when Kayla Hodgson hears her doorbell ring and walks to her front door in pajamas, still half dreaming, she has no idea that the woman standing outside has traveled over 1,000 miles just to see her. She has no idea that this woman has been awake all night. That this woman has rehearsed this moment. That this woman is wearing a disguise specifically so security cameras won't recognize her face. All Kayla knows is that someone is at her door. And in that split second before she opens it, before her life ends and a murder investigation begins, she probably wonders the same thing anyone would wonder at 5 a.m. Who could this be? But here's the question nobody's answered yet. The question that will haunt this entire case, that will divide courtrooms and comment sections and true crime podcasts for years. If Sakina Thompson flew all the way to Florida just to talk, why did she bring a weapon? And if she brought a weapon just for protection, why did she use it? We'll get to that. But first, you need to understand what happened on that flight. Because somewhere between Queens and Fort Lauderdale, between takeoff and landing, between blocking someone online and confronting them in person, something in Sakina Thompson hardened into certainty. And Kayla Hodgson, scrolling through her own phone in Tamarack, choosing an outfit for the day, texting Revelto goodnight one last time, had no idea she was running out of time. There's a psychological term you need to know before we go any further. It's called limerence. Not love, limerence. It was coined in 1979 by psychologist Dorothy Tenov, and it describes something most of us have felt but never had a name for. That obsessive, all-consuming infatuation where another person becomes the center of your entire universe. Where you check your phone every 30 seconds hoping for their text. Where you replay conversations in your head, analyzing every word, every pause, every emoji. Where the thought of them with someone else doesn't just hurt, It physically aches in your chest like something is crushing your ribcage from the inside. Limerence isn't rational. It doesn't care about your dignity or your mental health or the fact that the person has moved on. It's a neurochemical cocktail of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin that hijacks your brain's reward system the same way cocaine does. And when that person suddenly cuts off your access to them, when they block you, ghost you, erase you from their digital life, your brain doesn't process it as a breakup. It processes it as withdrawal. Now keep that in mind as we talk about what happened in Springfield Gardens, Queens, in those days leading up to July 13, 2022. Sakina Thompson wasn't just upset about Revelto Robinson dating someone new. She was in a full lime rent episode, compounded by something else. Something her defense team would later argue in Broward County Court during the October 2025 trial. She was 2 months pregnant. And pregnancy doesn't just change your body. It floods your system with hormones that can amplify every emotion you're already feeling. Progesterone, estrogen, human chorionic gonadotropin. These aren't just medical terms. They're mood regulators, and when they surge, they can turn anxiety into paranoia, sadness into despair, anger into rage. But here's the uncomfortable question that will follow this case into every courtroom, every news article, every true crime forum. Does biology excuse behavior? Does hormonal imbalance justify violence? Or is that just another way we infantilize women, strip them of agency, turn them into victims of their own bodies? Because men commit crimes of passion all the time. Men stalk their exes, murder their girlfriends, shoot up workplaces over rejection. And we call them dangerous. We call them predators. We don't blame testosterone. We don't say, well, he was going through a tough time, his masculine identity was threatened, maybe he just snapped. But when a woman does it, when Jodi Arias stabs Travis Alexander 27 times, when Shayna Hubers shoots Ryan Poston 6 times and calls it self-defense, when Sakina Thompson boards a plane with murder on her mind, suddenly we start asking different questions. Was she mentally ill? Was she abused? Was she manipulated? And maybe those are fair questions. Or maybe they're just proof that we still don't know how to process female violence without turning it into a tragedy where the woman is somehow also the victim. But back to July 11, 2022. Sakina has landed in Fort Lauderdale. She picks up a rental car. White sedan, nothing flashy. She doesn't drive straight to Tamarack. Not yet. First, she checks into a hotel somewhere in South Florida. The exact location was never disclosed in court, likely a chain hotel off Interstate 95, the kind with free breakfast and a parking lot where nobody asks questions. She's been planning this for at least a day, maybe longer. You don't just wake up and decide to fly 1,000 miles on a whim. You think about it. You justify it. You tell yourself a story about why this is necessary, why this is the only option, why the person who blocked you deserves to know how much pain they've caused. But what was Sakina's story? What did she tell herself in that hotel room? We know from later testimony that she created a fake Uber driver account. Think about that for a second. That's not something you do in a moment of passion. That's premeditation. That's the kind of detail that requires research, setup, verification. She needed a way to get close to Kayla Hodgson's apartment without raising suspicion. And what's more invisible in 2022 than a rideshare driver? Someone sitting in a parked car outside an apartment complex at odd hours? Totally normal. Someone wearing a mask in a pandemic-adjacent world? Expected even. So on July 12, the day before the murder, Sakina drove to Tamarack Village Apartments on Northwest 93rd Avenue and 57th Street. She parked. She watched. She studied the patterns. When do people leave for work? When do they come home? When is the complex quietest? Which apartment is Kayla's? And maybe she saw Kayla that day. Maybe she watched through tinted windows as Kayla walked to her car, laughing on the phone, completely unaware that someone was cataloging her every move. Maybe she watched Kayla come home that evening carrying takeout, still smiling, still safe. What does that do to a person? To watch the object of your obsession living her life, happy, unbothered, untouched by the chaos tearing you apart inside? There's another psychological concept here. Dehumanization. It's what happens when you stop seeing someone as a full person with thoughts and fears and people who love them, and start seeing them as an obstacle. A problem to solve. The reason your life fell apart. Kayla Hodgson wasn't a villain. By every account, from her family's testimony in Broward County Court, from friends who spoke to local Florida news stations, From social media posts that were later entered as evidence, she was kind. She loved fashion, scrolled through Pinterest boards for outfit inspiration, posted makeup tutorials on Instagram. She binge-watched The Office and quoted Jim and Pam at dinner. She worked a regular job in Tamarack, paid her rent on time, called her mom every Sunday. She had no idea Revelto Robinson had a pregnant ex-girlfriend in New York. Or maybe she did know and she figured it didn't matter because people have pasts and you can't control who someone dated before you. Either way, she never asked for any of this. But in Sakina's mind, by October 2025 when the trial began in Broward County Courtroom 7750, her defense lawyers would argue that Kayla wasn't innocent. That Kayla knew she was stepping into another woman's life. That Kayla blocking Sakina on Instagram was an act of aggression, proof that she knew exactly what she was doing. Except that's not how blocking works. Blocking is a boundary. It's a digital door you close when someone makes you uncomfortable. And if Kayla blocked Sakina, it's probably because Sakina was already doing something that felt invasive, commenting on posts, watching stories obsessively, sending messages that got ignored. But when you're in a lime-rent state, you don't see boundaries. You see rejection. You see cruelty. And here's what the forensic psychologists brought in during the trial explained. When someone experiencing limerence is blocked or rejected, their brain doesn't just register sadness. It registers existential threat. The same neural pathways that light up when you're in physical danger activate when the object of your obsession disappears. Fight or flight. Except there's nowhere to run from a feeling. So some people fight. July 12th turned into July 13th. Sakina didn't sleep. She couldn't. She sat in that hotel room running through scenarios. Maybe she told herself she just wanted to talk. Maybe she convinced herself that if she could just explain everything to Kayla face to face, woman to woman, then Kayla would understand. Would step aside. Would let Revelto go back to where he belonged. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was going to do and the disguise she packed, wide-brimmed hat, face mask, gloves, was never about having a conversation. Because here's the thing about disguises. You don't wear them when you're planning to talk. You wear them when you're planning to disappear. At 4:47 a.m. on July 13, 2022, Sakina got in her rental car and drove from the hotel to Tamarack Village Apartments. 17-minute drive, maybe less at that hour. No traffic. Just empty roads and streetlights and the hum of the air conditioner fighting off Florida's summer heat. She parked in a spot where she could see Kayla's front door. She adjusted the hat. Pulled the mask up over her nose. Slipped on the gloves. And then she walked across the parking lot like she belonged there, like she was just another resident coming home late from a night shift. 5:17 a.m. She rang the doorbell. Kayla Hodgson, 23 years old, wearing pajamas, still half asleep, walked to the door and opened it. What happened in the next 90 seconds would turn a love triangle into a murder case. But before we get there, you need to understand one more thing. Sakina Thompson later claimed in interrogation that she blacked out. That she didn't remember what happened. That the pregnancy hormones, the lack of sleep, the emotional turmoil all collided into a fugue state where her body acted but her mind wasn't present. Forensic psychology has a term for that too. Dissociative amnesia. Real. It happens. Trauma, extreme stress, even overwhelming guilt can cause your brain to lock away memories as a protective mechanism. But here's what prosecutors argued in that Broward County courtroom. You don't black out and accidentally travel 1,000 miles. You don't black out and book a flight, rent a car, buy a disguise, create a fake account, surveil an apartment for a full day, and then show up at someone's door at 5 a.m. That's not a blackout. That's a plan. And the difference between those two things, between a crime of passion and premeditated murder, is the difference between 15 years and life in prison. So what really happened when that door opened? Was Sakina a woman in crisis who lost control? Or was she a killer who knew exactly what she was doing? The evidence is about to answer that question. And once you hear it, you won't be able to look at a blocked Instagram account the same way ever again. There's a moment in every violent crime that investigators call the point of no return. It's not when the first punch is thrown or the first shot is fired. It's earlier than that. It's the moment when someone makes a choice that eliminates every other option. When they cross a threshold they can never step back over. For Sakina Thompson, that moment happened at 5:17 a.m. on July 13, 2022, when her finger pressed Kayla Hodgson's doorbell at Tamarack Village Apartments on Northwest 93rd Avenue and 57th Street in Tamarack, Florida. But here's what makes this case different from 1,000 other crimes of passion. Kayla didn't have to open that door. Think about that. 5 in the morning. Still dark outside. A stranger at your doorstep. Every instinct should scream danger. Every true crime podcast you've ever listened to should echo in your head. Don't open the door. So why did she? The answer lies in something forensic psychologists call the normalcy bias. It's a cognitive error where our brains, when faced with something unusual or threatening, default to the safest possible explanation. A knock at your door at 5 a.m. can't be a killer because killers don't ring doorbells. They break in. They ambush. They don't wait politely for you to answer like they're delivering a package. Kayla's brain, still foggy with sleep, probably ran through the normal explanations. Wrong apartment. Early shift neighbor locked out. Maintenance emergency. Maybe even Revelto, though he had a key. The one explanation her brain couldn't land on was the truth. A woman from New York who she'd never met in person, who she'd blocked on Instagram less than 72 hours ago, had flown 1,000 miles and was standing on the other side of that door wearing a disguise. The security footage from the apartment complex, later entered as evidence by the Broward Sheriff's Office, shows the moment in grainy black and white. A figure in a wide-brimmed hat and face mask, gloves covering both hands despite Florida's summer heat. The timestamp reads 5 hours 17 minutes and 4 seconds. The figure stands perfectly still facing the door waiting. 14 seconds pass. Then the door opens. And this is where the legal procedure gets complicated, because what happened in the next 90 seconds exists in 2 completely different versions depending on who's telling the story. Version 1 comes from Sakina Thompson herself, given during her interrogation on July 15, 2022, after she was arrested back in Queens, New York. In her version, she knocked because she needed to talk to Kayla woman to woman. She just wanted Kayla to understand that Revelto Robinson wasn't who Kayla thought he was. That he had a history. That he had a child on the way. That Kayla was destroying a family. According to Sakina's statement, Kayla opened the door already angry. Already defensive. Started yelling about how Sakina needed to let go, how Revelto had moved on, how she needed to stop stalking them online. And then Sakina claimed Kayla tried to slam the door. Tried to shut her out. And something inside Sakina snapped. She said she blacked out. That the next thing she remembered was being back in her rental car, shaking, covered in something she didn't want to look at. She said the pregnancy hormones, the stress, the rejection all collided into a moment where she wasn't herself. Where her body moved but her mind wasn't there. That's version 1. And if you believe it, then what happened next was a tragedy. A woman in crisis who lost control. But version 2 comes from the physical evidence. And physical evidence doesn't lie. It doesn't have emotions or motives or hormonal imbalances. It just exists. The medical examiner's report presented during the October 2025 trial in Broward County Court told a different story. Kayla Hodgson suffered multiple stab wounds. Not 1 or 2 in a moment of panic. Multiple. The forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy testified that the pattern of injuries suggested a sustained attack. Defensive wounds on Kayla's hands and forearms indicated she fought back, tried to protect herself, tried to push the blade away. This is where forensic technique becomes crucial. When investigators analyze stab wounds, they look at depth, angle, location, and clustering. A single stab wound to the chest in the middle of a struggle might support a claim of accident or panic. But multiple wounds, delivered with enough force to penetrate vital organs, tell a different story. They suggest intent. They suggest someone who kept going even after the victim was incapacitated. The blood spatter analysis painted an even darker picture. Blood was found in the doorway, yes, but also deeper inside the apartment. In the living room. Near the couch. Which means Kayla didn't just open the door and immediately get attacked. She let Sakina inside. Or Sakina forced her way in. Either way, the violence didn't happen in one quick moment. It happened over time. Over space. As Kayla tried to escape, tried to get away, tried to survive. And here's the detail that prosecution would hammer home during the trial. Sakina brought the weapon with her. This wasn't a crime where someone grabbed a kitchen knife in the heat of an argument. Sakina came to that door armed. Disguised. Prepared. That's not a blackout. That's premeditation. But let's go back to what Kayla was experiencing in those final moments. Because understanding the victim's perspective is what separates true crime entertainment from actually honoring the person who was lost. Kayla Hodgson woke up that morning the same way she woke up every morning. Checked her phone. Maybe scrolled through Instagram, responded to messages, looked at the weather. It was going to be hot. Florida in July always is. She probably thought about what to wear, whether she had time to make coffee or if she'd grab some on the way to work. And then the doorbell rang. She walked to the door. Maybe she looked through the peephole first. Saw a woman. Hat, mask, gloves. Weird but not threatening. Not yet. Maybe the woman said something through the door. Something about Rivelto. Something that made Kayla curious enough to open it. And the second that door swung open, Kayla's normal Tuesday morning became the last morning of her life. We don't know exactly what words were exchanged. Sakina's version keeps changing. But we know from the neighbors' statements to the Broward Sheriff's Office that they heard yelling. A woman's voice, high and frantic, saying no, no, please. Another voice, lower, angrier, saying something about disrespect, about stealing, about how Kayla had no right. One neighbor who testified during the trial said she almost called the police. Almost. But it was 5 a.m. and domestic disputes happen and she didn't want to get involved. By the time she decided it sounded serious enough to warrant a call, everything had gone quiet. That silence is what haunts people. Because silence, in a case like this, doesn't mean resolution. It means someone stopped fighting. Someone stopped breathing. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old. She loved fashion and humor and making people laugh. She had a job she showed up to on time, friends who tagged her in memes, a family in Florida who thought she was invincible the way you think everyone you love is invincible until they're not. And at 5:19 a.m. on July 13, 2022, just 2 minutes after that doorbell rang, she was gone. Sakina left. Walked back to her rental car like nothing happened. Drove back to her hotel somewhere in South Florida. Changed clothes. Cleaned up. Checked out. Returned the rental car. Boarded a flight back to Queens, New York that same day. All of this is documented. Flight records subpoenaed by the Broward Sheriff's Office show she was back in New York by the evening of July 13th. Credit card receipts show she bought food at the Fort Lauderdale airport, shopped at a convenience store, acted like a normal person on a normal trip. Meanwhile, back in Tamarack, Kayla's body lay undiscovered for hours. Rivelto Robinson found her at approximately 3:30 p.m. that afternoon. He'd been calling her all day. Texts going unanswered. Calls going to voicemail. He figured she was busy or her phone died, or she was upset with him about something and needed space. You tell yourself the normal explanations because the alternative is unthinkable. But when he got to her apartment and saw the door slightly open, when he pushed it the rest of the way and called her name and got no response, when he walked inside and saw what had been done to the woman he loved, there's no training for that moment. No psychological framework that prepares you for finding someone you were texting goodnight to just hours ago now lying in a pool of their own blood. He called 911 at 3:34 p.m. The recording was played during the trial. You can hear him hyperventilating, trying to explain what he's seeing, the dispatcher asking him to check for a pulse even though it's clear from his voice that he already knows she's gone. Broward Sheriff's Office deputies arrived within 6 minutes. Tamarack Police Department secured the scene. Crime scene investigators photographed everything. Blood spatter analysts mapped the patterns. The medical examiner arrived to officially pronounce what everyone already knew. And then the detective work began. Because here's what most people don't understand about modern homicide investigations. They're not like TV shows where a detective has a hunch and solves the case in 40 minutes. They're methodical, tedious, built on databases and digital footprints and thousands of small details that only matter when you connect them all together. The lead detective, whose name was mentioned during trial testimony but whose identity will keep private out of respect for ongoing investigations, started with the basics. Who had access to the apartment? Who knew Kayla? Who had a motive? Rivelto told them everything. About Sakina. About the breakup. About the pregnancy. About the Instagram blocking. And that's when the pieces started clicking into place. They pulled Sakina's phone records. Saw the flight booked July 11th. Pulled surveillance from Fort Lauderdale Airport. Saw her arriving. Pulled rental car records. Saw her driving a white sedan. Pulled security footage from Tamarack Village Apartments. saw a woman matching her description disguised at Kayla's door at 5:17 a.m. By July 14th, they had enough for an arrest warrant. By July 15th, NYPD officers were knocking on Sakina Thompson's door in Springfield Gardens, Queens. She answered. Still pregnant. Still playing the role of someone whose life was moving forward normally. And when they told her she was under arrest for the murder of Kayla Hodgson in Tamarack, Florida, she did something interesting. She didn't ask what they were talking about. Didn't claim innocence. Didn't demand a lawyer. She asked, "How did you find me?" That question tells you everything you need to know. Because innocent people don't ask how they got caught. Innocent people ask why they're being accused. But Sakina's first instinct wasn't to defend herself. It was to understand where her plan had failed. And that's when her story started to shift. In the interrogation room at the NYPD precinct, before she was extradited back to Florida, she gave her statement. The one about blacking out. About the hormones. About not remembering. About just wanting to talk. But here's what the forensic psychologist brought in by the prosecution explained during trial. Dissociative amnesia is real, but it follows patterns. People who genuinely black out during violent episodes usually have fragmented memories. They remember pieces. The before and after, but not the during. They're confused about how they got from point A to point C. Sakina wasn't confused. She remembered booking the flight. Remembered the disguise. Remembered creating the fake Uber account. Remembered driving to the apartment. She even remembered knocking on the door. The only part she claimed not to remember was the actual violence. The part that would make her legally culpable for first-degree murder. Convenient, the prosecution argued. Convenient that the blackout started exactly when the crime began and ended exactly when she needed to flee. Convenient that she remembered enough to cover her tracks but not enough to be held accountable. The defense pushed back. Argued that trauma works in mysterious ways. That a pregnant woman under extreme emotional distress is not in her right mind. That Kayla provoked her, disrespected her, threatened her unborn child. But here's the question that hung over that entire Broward County courtroom in October 2025. If you truly blacked out, if you truly had no control, why did you disguise yourself? Why did you book a one-way flight? Why did you surveil the apartment the day before? People who snap in the moment don't plan. People who plan don't get to claim they snapped. And as the trial moved forward, as witness after witness took the stand, as the evidence piled up in folders and photographs and blood spatter reports, one thing became crystal clear. Kayla Hodgson didn't die because of a blackout. She died because Sakina Thompson decided, days in advance, that she was going to. The only question left was whether a jury would see it that way. Whether 12 strangers in Broward County, Florida, would look at a pregnant woman from New York and see a victim of her own emotions, or a cold-blooded killer who used pregnancy as a shield. But before we get to that verdict, you need to understand what happened in the days after the arrest. Because this case didn't just reveal the dangers of obsession. It revealed something darker about how we consume tragedy, how we pick sides, how we turn murder into entertainment. And Kayla Hodgson's family was about to learn that the hard way. There's a concept in criminal law called the chain of custody. It sounds technical, boring even, but it's the invisible thread that holds an entire murder case together. Every piece of evidence, every fingerprint, every surveillance photo, every credit card receipt, has to be documented from the moment it's collected until the moment it's presented in court. Who found it? Who bagged it? Who transported it? Who analyzed it? Who stored it? Break that chain anywhere and a defense attorney can argue the evidence is tainted, unreliable, inadmissible. The Broward Sheriff's Office knew this. They knew that Sakina Thompson's lawyers would look for any crack, any inconsistency, any reason to cast doubt. So they built their case like they were constructing a bridge, one steel beam at a time, engineered to hold up under the weight of scrutiny. It started July 13, 2022, the same day Kayla Hodgson's body was discovered at 3:34 p.m. in her apartment at Tamarack Village Apartments. Crime scene investigators arrived within the hour. They photographed everything before moving anything. The position of the body. The blood patterns on the floor, the walls, the door frame. The defensive wounds on Kayla's hands. The lack of forced entry. That last detail was critical. No broken windows. No kicked-in door. No signs of a struggle outside the apartment. Which meant Kayla had let her killer inside. Either she knew the person or the person convinced her they weren't a threat. the lead investigator working out of the Broward Sheriff's Office headquarters in Fort Lauderdale, started building a timeline. Who was the last person to see Kayla alive? Rivalto Robinson. But he had an alibi. He'd been at work across town, clocked in at 6 a.m., didn't leave until his lunch break when he went to check on Kayla and found her dead. So who else had motive? Who else had access? That's when Rivalto mentioned the ex-girlfriend. The one in New York who'd been texting him obsessively. The one Kayla had blocked on Instagram just days before. Sakina Thompson became the primary suspect within 24 hours. But suspecting someone and proving they committed murder across state lines are two very different things. The investigators needed evidence. Hard, documented, irrefutable evidence. They started with digital forensics. Pulled Sakina's phone records through a court order. Saw calls to Rivalto's number in the days leading up to July 13th, most of them unanswered. Saw text messages that escalated from pleading to angry to threatening. Saw internet searches on her phone for Tamarack, Florida. For Kayla Hodgson's Instagram profile, viewed repeatedly even after being blocked, likely through a burner account. Then they pulled her financial records, credit card statements, bank transactions, and there was July 11, 2022. A charge from a major airline. One-way ticket. LaGuardia Airport in Queens, New York, to Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport in Florida. Departure 9:15 a.m., arrival 12:43 p.m. She'd flown to Florida 2 days before the murder. Next came the rental car records. Enterprise Rent-A-Car at Fort Lauderdale Airport. White sedan, checked out 1:17 p.m. on July 11th, returned 2:48 p.m. on July 13th. Mileage logged, 47 miles. Just enough to drive from the airport to Tamarack, scout the location, return the next day and drive back. But the piece of evidence that sealed the case came from the security cameras at Tamarack Village Apartments. The complex had installed a new surveillance system just 3 months earlier after a string of car break-ins. High-definition cameras at every entrance, every parking lot, every building. The footage from July 12th showed a white sedan matching the rental car description circling the complex at 11:23 a.m., then parking near Building C where Kayla lived. A figure in a hat and sunglasses sat in the driver's seat for 47 minutes. Just watching. The footage from July 13th at 5:17 a.m. showed that same figure approaching Kayla's door. Hat, mask, gloves. Standing there for 14 seconds before Kayla opened it. The investigator froze the frame. Zoomed in. The resolution was good enough to see the outline of the hat brim, the type of mask, the way the person stood with their weight shifted slightly to the left. But here's where legal procedure gets tricky. Security footage can place someone at a scene, but it can't definitively identify them. Not without additional corroboration. A defense attorney could argue it was someone else wearing similar clothes. Reasonable doubt. So they needed more. On July 25, 2022, 12 days after the murder, the Broward County State Attorney's Office issued an arrest warrant for Sakina Thompson. The warrant listed charges of first-degree murder with premeditation. Florida law defines first-degree murder as a killing that is willful, deliberate, and premeditated, meaning the defendant formed a conscious intent to kill and had time to reflect on that decision before acting. Premeditation doesn't require weeks or days. Legally, it can happen in seconds. But the prosecution had more than seconds. They had 2 full days. The flight. The rental car. The surveillance. The disguise. Now came the hard part. Sakina Thompson was in New York. Florida had no jurisdiction there. They needed her extradited, which meant working with NYPD and navigating interstate legal protocols. The U.S. Constitution has a clause specifically for this. Article 4, Section 2. A person charged in any state with a crime who flees to another state shall, on demand of the executive authority of the state from which they fled, be delivered up to be removed to the state having jurisdiction of the crime. In practice, this means the governor of Florida had to formally request extradition from the governor of New York. Paperwork was filed. Legal arguments were made. And on August 3, 2022, NYPD officers arrested Sakina Thompson at her apartment in Springfield Gardens, Queens. She didn't run. Didn't resist. Opened the door when they knocked, listened to the charges, asked for a lawyer. She was processed at the local precinct, held in custody while the extradition was finalized. then transported to Florida under armed escort on August 9, 2022. She was booked into the Broward County Jail in Fort Lauderdale. No bail. First-degree murder charges in Florida are non-bondable when the proof is evident and the presumption is great. Translation: if the evidence overwhelmingly suggests guilt, you don't get to go home and wait for trial. Sakina sat in that jail for over 3 years. October 2025. That's how long it took for the case to go to trial. Now, if you're wondering why it took so long, you need to understand how the American criminal justice system works. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to a speedy trial, but speedy is relative. In Florida, a defendant must be brought to trial within 175 days of arrest unless there are legal continuances, delays requested by either the defense or prosecution for legitimate reasons like gathering evidence, conducting forensic analysis, or scheduling expert witnesses. Sakina's defense team filed multiple motions. Motion to suppress the surveillance footage, arguing it was obtained without proper warrant. Denied. Motion to exclude the flight records, arguing they didn't prove intent. Denied. Motion for a change of venue, arguing pretrial publicity in Broward County made a fair trial impossible. Denied. Each motion added months to the timeline. Finally, in October 2025, the trial began in Broward County Court, Room 7750, under Judge Andrew L. Siegel. Judge Siegel had a reputation. 30 years on the bench. No nonsense. Intolerant of theatrics. If you came into his courtroom, you came prepared. Jury selection took 3 days. The prosecution wanted jurors who could handle graphic evidence without bias. The defense wanted jurors who could empathize with a pregnant woman under emotional duress. They settled on 12 people. 7 women, 5 men, ranging in age from 28 to 64. A retired teacher. A nurse. A construction manager. An accountant. Regular people asked to decide if someone deserved to spend the rest of their life in prison. Opening statements began October 7, 2025. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Flight records. Rental car receipts. Surveillance footage. The medical examiner's report detailing Kayla's injuries. The forensic analysis of the blood spatter patterns. The timeline showing premeditation. They painted Sakina Thompson as a woman scorned who turned obsession into murder. The defense countered with a different narrative. Sakina wasn't a monster. She was a victim. A pregnant woman abandoned by the father of her child, replaced by someone younger, pushed to a breaking point by hormonal imbalance and emotional trauma. They argued she flew to Florida to confront Kayla, not to kill her. That the violence erupted in a moment of panic when Kayla became aggressive, when Sakina feared for her unborn baby. They brought in an expert witness, a psychologist specializing in prenatal mental health. She testified about pregnancy-induced psychosis, a rare condition where hormonal fluctuations cause breaks from reality, hallucinations, impaired judgment. She said it was possible, though uncommon, for someone to commit an act of violence during a psychotic episode and have no memory of it afterward. But the prosecution's rebuttal expert, a forensic psychiatrist, dismantled that argument. He explained that pregnancy psychosis typically presents with other symptoms: paranoia, delusions, inability to care for oneself. Sakina showed none of those signs. She booked a flight, navigated an airport, rented a car, found an address. Those are complex, goal-oriented tasks. Someone in a psychotic state can't execute a multi-day plan. The testimony went on for days. Revelto Robinson took the stand, visibly shaken, describing the moment he found Kayla's body. Kayla's mother took the stand, crying as she talked about the daughter she'd never see graduate, get married, have children. She called the murder savage, senseless, a violation of everything her daughter represented. Sakina's mother took the stand too, defended her daughter, said Sakina was a good person who made a terrible mistake under unbearable stress, begged the jury to show mercy. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Would Sakina testify in her own defense? Her lawyers advised against it. Put a defendant on the stand and the prosecution gets to cross-examine. Gets to ask questions designed to trip you up, expose contradictions, make you look guilty even if you're not. But Sakina insisted. She wanted the jury to hear her side. On October 12, 2025, she took the stand. Spoke softly. Maintained eye contact with the jury. described the pain of losing Revelto, the fear of raising a child alone, the desperation she felt when Kayla blocked her on Instagram. She admitted flying to Florida, admitted going to the apartment, but she swore she only wanted to talk. That Kayla attacked her first. That she grabbed the knife in self-defense. That everything after that was a blur. The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal. Why did you disguise yourself if you just wanted to talk? Why did you arrive at 5 a.m. when most people are asleep? Why didn't you call the police after the incident if it was self-defense? Why did you flee back to New York without reporting anything? Sakina's answers were evasive. Contradictory. She claimed she panicked, feared she wouldn't be believed, thought she could pretend it never happened. At the time of the crime. That left life without parole. The jury wasn't buying it. Closing arguments happened October 14, 2025. The prosecution reminded the jury of the evidence. The planning. The disguise. The multiple stab wounds. They argued this wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated murder. The defense made one last plea. Asked the jury to consider the humanity of the woman sitting at the defendant's table. A woman who made a catastrophic mistake but didn't deserve to die in prison. The jury deliberated for 1 hour. October 15, 2025. They returned with a verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. Sakina's face didn't change. Didn't cry. Didn't react. Just stared straight ahead as the judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing date. December 1, 2025. Back in room 7750 of Broward County Court. Judge Andrew L. Siegel presiding. The courtroom was packed. Kayla's family on one side. Sakina's family on the other. Reporters in the back row. Under Florida law, first-degree murder carries one of two sentences. Life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. The prosecution did not seek the death penalty, citing Sakina's lack of prior criminal record and the fact that she was pregnant. Kayla's mother gave a victim impact statement. Her voice shook as she described what it felt like to bury her daughter. To walk into her apartment and see the place where she died. To know that someone had taken her away over something as trivial as a social media block. She looked directly at Sakina and said, "You didn't just kill my daughter. You killed a part of me that will never come back." Sakina was given the opportunity to speak. She stood. No tears. No apology. Just a flat, emotionless statement about how she never intended for any of this to happen, how she hoped Kayla's family could one day find peace. Judge Siegel wasn't impressed. He called the crime heinous, calculated, and completely devoid of remorse. He sentenced Sakina Thompson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She'll spend the rest of her life in a Florida state prison. No chance of release. No chance of parole. No second chances. But here's where the controversy starts. 1 hour. That's how long the jury deliberated. 60 minutes to decide someone's entire future. Some legal analysts argued it was too fast, that complex cases deserve more reflection, that a quick verdict suggests the jury had already made up their minds before deliberations even started. Others argued the evidence was overwhelming, that sometimes the truth is so clear it doesn't need hours of debate. And then there's the gender question. Would a male defendant have been treated the same way? If a man had flown across the country to confront his ex's new boyfriend, would we be talking about hormones and mental health? Or would we just call him a killer and move on? The answer probably depends on who you ask. What's undeniable is this. Kayla Hodgson is gone. A 23-year-old woman who loved fashion and sitcoms and making people smile, erased from the world because someone couldn't handle rejection. And Sakina Thompson, a woman who let obsession consume her until there was nothing left but rage, will spend the rest of her life paying for 90 seconds of violence. Justice? Maybe. Closure? Probably not. Because Kayla's family still wakes up every day in a world without her. And no verdict, no sentence, no amount of prison time will ever bring her back.